First of all, everybody, welcome. Thank you for coming. I hope I don't disappoint you. What I want to speak about, really, obviously it's right down the road. It's only 3 weeks from now, basically. So clearly there is an enormous relevance to this particular lecture or shiur. However, besides that, the enormous relevance, I want to try to really, in many ways, demonstrate something. We think that we know the reasons for Jewish holidays, right? We think we know, what's the big deal? We've gone through how many Rosh Hashanahs? Depends how old you are, right? But clearly we've gone through many, many Rosh Hashanahs. And, in each experience, of course, hopefully, we're able to negotiate with God. That's really what it is. Although it's very hard to negotiate with a judge. But the Rabbi Shem, in many ways, as we will see, is really on our side. However, there are many different questions that we can ask about Rosh Hashanah. What I want to show you, really, and in many ways, this shiur has several objectives. One, obviously, is to tell you the information about what Rosh Hashanah really is about. What really happens on Rosh Hashanah? Now, to most people, that's a very, what? You're going to tell me what happens on Rosh Hashanah? We all know what happens on Rosh Hashanah. It's a day of judgment. We all know that. That's elementary. You can stop any kid in school and he's going to tell you it's a day of judgment. So what am I going to say? And how can I even ask the question, what really happens on Rosh Hashanah? But not only that, I want to demonstrate something else, which in a certain sense is even more important. As you will see, most people do not know what happens on Rosh Hashanah, as you will see. So the real question is, what about the other Yom Tovim? You mean if Rosh Hashanah has such a depth, such an incredible understanding, which we will see, then what that would indicate is that every single holiday, or rather every single day that is commemorated by Jews, even Tisha B'Av, clearly is more profound than what most people imagine. So my purpose here is not only just tell you the information about Rosh Hashanah, what really happens, but really to try to demonstrate to you that every single thing a Jew does, and I'm only involving myself, obviously in the aspect of Yom Tov, like Rosh Hashanah and so on. Every one of them has a tremendous amount of depth, pnimius. And I don't necessarily mean Kabbalistic either. You don't have to go to Kabbalah to figure out the depth of something, because that's a whole different world. That's a whole different dimension of understanding anything. No. There's an enormous depth to Rosh Hashanah, not at the level of Kabbalah. Kabbalah, of course, is much deeper, and it's more closer to the cause and so on. But there's a tremendous depth to Rosh Hashanah in terms of Rosh Hashanah itself, in terms of the hashkafa itself. So as such, I want to demonstrate and therefore create what's called a precedent, that every holiday, one can look at it in an incredibly profound way. And that's its beauty. Not only that, once you understand what really is going on, you then understand something also very important, and that is the mitzvahs which are connected to the day. Every holiday has certain mitzvahs, whether it be min Torah, biblical, or midrabanan, rabbinical. Why do we have these mitzvahs? What do they have to do with the day itself? As we will see. And what I'm going to try to do is bring a greater clarity to the whole understanding of shofar. Because the real mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah is shofar, obviously. There's also the concept of tefillah, but there's also the concept of korbanos. But certainly shofar is one of the greatest of all mysteries. What do you need it for, really? We can have all kinds of symbolic references to shofar. And Rav Sadia Goin, right, he gives 10 reasons why you have shofar. And they're all true. But is that what it's all about? Shofar is really only reduced to being a symbolism of something? Or is it something much more profound in the way God runs the world? Well, we're going to take a look at that. So, in order to really dramatize this idea that Rosh Hashanah and all holidays have a tremendous profundity to it, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. And of course, everybody here based on your own understanding, you're going to know the answers, of course. Maybe. But if you don't know the answers, you're going to ask yourself, wow, how come I never thought about that? And he's right. If I cannot answer this question, so then what do I really understand about Rosh Hashana? Okay? So as such, I'm going to begin this year with a series of questions. I asked for your patience, but you'll see that each question really is very striking, because the answer should be so obvious, yet it's not easy to understand. So, first question. What is the essence of Rosh Hashana? Which is really what the whole title of the shir is. What really happens on Rosh Hashana? What is it? It's a question. Now, of course, if I ask that question to the audience, what would the audience say? Come on, it's Yom HaDin. It's a day of judgment, right? What's the problem here? Well, let me ask you something. Imagine you live in New York City. Well, unfortunately, I do. But you live in New York City, right? And all of a sudden, the government, the mayor, Bloomberg, he says, okay, we ran out of money. Almost. The courts are now going to remain open for judgment 1 day a year. Do you know what would happen on day 2? Well, think about it. The courts are only open 1 day a year, right? It would be chaos. Every criminal in New York would have a field day for 364 days of the year, right? Because there's no judgment. There's no judgment. So the question is, this doesn't make sense. How could there be only 1 day a year that is a judgment day? That doesn't make any sense. A person is involved in doing mitzvahs and sins every day of the year, isn't he not? So we would expect that there should be judgment basically after every day. So it doesn't even make sense. What does it mean that there's a judgment on Rosh Hashana? Which essentially means there's a judgment for 1 day of a year. That makes no sense. No society can survive on 1 day a year judgment. It would be a pandemonium. Interesting question, isn't it? You see? First question already doesn't make sense. Next question. There's a contradiction. There's a Gemara in Rosh Hashana that says, Odom nidim b'chol yom. A person is judged every day. Oh, now that makes sense, right? A person is judged every day. That makes sense. So isn't that a contradiction to Rosh Hashana? How can a person be judged every day and on Rosh Hashana is judged once a year? Like, what does that mean here? Are there different things of judgment going on? What does it really mean? Because we know that Rosh Hashana really is, everything is judged. Is it not? Your livelihood, your life, what kind of a year you're going to have. It's all, your health, everything is judged from the beginning of the year. So the question is, what does that mean? If the Gemara says that a person is judged on every day, in every day. Another question. We know that every Jewish holiday has a historical Jewish antecedent. Means it has a reason in the calendar of Jewish events. Does it not? For instance, Pesach. What's the historical event that Pesach refers to? Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? Shavuos, the giving of the Torah, right? Sukkot, whether it be according to Machlokes in the Gemara, whether it be the Sukkot or the clouds, whatever it be, every single holiday, Tisha B'Av, has some type of previous historical event of which we refer to when we do the mitzvah of that holiday. So then the question is, what does Rosh Hashana have to do? Where is the Judaism in Rosh Hashana? That is the question. What does Rosh Hashana have to do with Judaism? Now, some people will say, wait a minute. We know Rosh Hashana is when Adam Rishon was created. When is Rosh Hashana? It's Aleph Tishrei. It is the first day of Tishrei, is it not? Yes. So we know Aleph Tishrei. What happened on Aleph Tishrei? Adam Rishon was created, right? The world was created in 25th day of Elul, Chofei Elul, and 6 days later is Rosh Hashana. What was done 6 days after creation, right? Adam Rishon was created. So that we do know, that Adam Rishon was created on Aleph Tishrei, that we know. But let me ask you something. Didn't I say that every Jewish holiday refers to a specific Jewish event? Was Adam Rishon Jewish? Last time I checked? I don't think so. Right? So what does it mean, Jewish? Adam Rishon's not Jewish. I mean, it's true that he's the first human, right? He and his wife, right? But he's not Jewish. So what does it mean? It would seem that Rosh Hashanah is the only day that violates that rule. That has nothing to do with Judaism. It has to do with what? Mankind. Correct? And it's true that Rosh Hashanah is a judgment of mankind, is it not? But somehow we borrowed Rosh Hashanah and we made it Jewish. Right? We made it Jewish. So then the question is, there's got to be something Jewish about Rosh Hashanah, besides that it's a holiday of a mankind holiday, that it commemorates the creation of the first man. There's got to be something Jewish about it, right? I mean, after all, we dip things in honey. We have honey, we have challah and honey, we eat challah. There's got to be something Jewish. The question is, what is it? A Yom HaDin is a day of judgment. Why is it on Rosh Hashanah? Why is it on Aleph Tishrei? The truth is, a day of judgment, even if it's going to be once a year, can be any day of the year, really. So why does the Rosh Hashanah say that the judgment day is on the first day of Tishrei? What's unique about the first day of Tishrei that the day of judgment would be on that? Now, here's another question. Last time I checked, animals have no free will, right? We have free will. Animals have no free will. So the question is, if you look at it in Nisan Toikef, which is one of the major piyutim, right? That was written hundreds of years ago, 700, 800, actually 900 years ago, 1,000 years ago. It says they kol boya oilem. Everybody, anything that exists, clearly living creatures, are judged. So then the question is, how do you judge an animal? Animals don't work by free will. They work by instinct. So an animal cannot be culpable. It cannot be chayiv, cannot be guilty. A tiger looks to eat. A tiger's not guilty of murder. A tiger kills because it wants to eat, and there goes dinner. We don't look at a tiger that it's culpable for a sin. There's no moral infraction that a tiger does. I mean, obviously, get out of its way because you don't want to be killed. But nobody would ever morally put a tiger in judgment and say, you are guilty of murder. It's absurd. There's no free will. So then how does everything get judged? Simple question. But somehow it confronts your understanding of Rosh Hashanah because it doesn't make sense. Yet we do know that everything is judged. Another idea. You have an idea what it feels like to be judged if you're going to live or die? I want to show you something. A guy goes to court, and let's assume he's up for murder. Right? He's up for murder. Okay. So he's got to show up at a certain date. Right? So on the date, let's say he's got to show up Tuesday. Whatever. He shows up Tuesday, but before he shows up, the night before, he has this incredible festive meal. Like, all the goodies, whatever the guy likes. Steak, duck, tongue. I mean, that's what I like, right? So I assume that's what he would like, right? So the question is, how in the world is this guy eating as if nothing is going to take place the next day? You're going to be judged. We are going to be judged if we live or die. What are we celebrating here? Not only that, we make sure we get the best food, and we bring over the whole family. You know what I'm saying? What are you talking about? The guy sitting at the head of the table is about to be judged. He's going to live or die, right? What is he celebrating? You know what people look like when they're on trial for life and death, right? They look like they're ready for the morgue. They don't look like they're about to celebrate something. So how in the world can Rosh Hashanah be a Yom Tov? And notice when you walk out of shul, what do you say? Yom Tov. Excuse me, Yom Tov? I mean, that's got to be the biggest confrontation to what you believe Rosh Hashanah is all about. How can a day of judgment of life and death be a Yom Tov? That is the question. Now, what's interesting is the Malachim, the angels. So they come to the Rebbe Shalom and they say, if this is a Yom Tov, so why we should be saying Hallel, right? Because what do we say on Hallel? What do we say on Yom Tov? We say Hallel. So that means we should be saying Hallel. Could you imagine Jews saying Hallel on Yom HaDin? It doesn't make sense. It is completely incompatible and inappropriate to the entire happenings of the day. So what are the Malachim talking about? How you say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah? So what does the Rebbe Shalom answer? Because the Malachim are addressing God, right? So the Rebbe Shalom's got to answer him, right? So he says, I'll tell you, you guys have an interesting point, but it's not appropriate. You know why? Because since the books of life and death are opened in front of me, you really can't say Hallel. Wow. You mean the Rebbe Hashem is saying something that we would never have thought about, that the books of life and death are opened, and therefore you can't say Hallel. What's obvious? What are the Malachim even talking about? What are they talking about? I mean, okay, the Rebbe Hashem answers them, but you'd look at the Malachim and say, you guys better get your act together. What are you asking me this? The books of life obviously are open. You're asking me to say Hallel? What kind of question is that? Now, we know that the IQ of Malachim are off the charts. We know that. The IQ of a Malach is beyond comprehension. I know that many people think that they're smart. However, I guarantee you, you're not smarter than a Malach at all. His IQ is off the charts. So if we can figure out that we don't even have the question of why we should say Hallel, I'm sure that a Malach clearly would not have that question. So the question is, what is he talking about? What are the Malachim really talking about? Also, when we look at the day itself, we say what? We say, in Musaf, we say 3 types of tefillas. We say Malchus, where we declare God as king. We say Zechroinus, where we ask God to remember the good deeds of our ancestors, and so on, to remember them, and please, take that in consideration. And then we talk about Sheforos. We mentioned the concept of a shofar. There's a whole series of psukim that mention the concept of a shofar. The question is, what is the logic of this, really? If you're a lawyer and you present a defense, the defense has to make sense, right? It has to answer the charge. So what is our defensive argument by offering these 3 topics? Because that's really how you have to view it, as a defensive posture. So the question is, how do they defend ourselves? Especially the concept of shofar. What does this have to do with the defense? Then the next question is, what is shofar all about, which I mentioned? What is it all about? What is this mystery of shofar? And we know that there's tremendous weight applied to shofar. Shofar isn't just a mitzvah. It is the real mitzvah of the day. Sukkot has a ton of mitzvahs. Pesach has a lot of mitzvahs. But in Rosh Hashana, that is the essential mitzvah, is shofar, is to hear the shofar. So the question is, what is it? What's so important about it that we need to hear shofar? What is the mystery behind shofar? That is the question. And then there's a posik that says, Ki choik li Yisrael, that the shofar is tikku by shofar b'kesed b'yom chagenu, ki choik li Yisrael, it is a choik. A choik is that which is not understood. Umishpat lelukei Yaakov. Why this differentiation? You mean to us it's a choik. We don't understand its rationale. But to God it's a mishpat. What does that mean? It's a judgment to God. You see. What does that posik really mean? So therefore, that's a question. Also, if you ask yourself, when we blow shofar, what are we really doing? We are really emulating the sounds of crying. That's where it emanates from. We have Tkiya, Shvam, Tkur, Tkiya, Tashrat, or whatever. So a Tkiya resembles a human wail when it cries. A person cries, he has a wail. Then a person will sigh, where he won't cry, all of a sudden it'll break. That's a shever. And that represents the sighing of a person while he's crying. And then a person will break down into a staccato, and so on. I'm a poor imitator. But anyway, he'll break down into a staccato. That's called a trua. And then he'll do another wail. That's really what the sounds of a shofar are all about. The question is why? Why does a shofar have to imitate the sounds of human crying? That is the question. And then we have another question. It says that, we blow shofar. Why? At different times, because we want to confuse, or the wording is, we want to confound the Satan. We want to confuse him. We want to get him all discombobulated, as they say, and so on, because we're hoping to stop him from prosecuting, because that's what he does. Last time I checked, the Satan is 5,771 years old. Since that time, we have had 5,771 Rosh Hashanas. Now, if we take a look at Judaism, right, the Jewish history, right, we've had approximately, let's say, 3,300 right? Rosh Hashanahs. I would think that a person would have figured out by now that on Aleph Tishrei, they're going to blow shofar, right? I would think that anybody who has an average IQ would have figured out that by now they're going to blow shofar. The question is, so why is he confused? What is this? I want to tell you something. The greatest, the most intelligent being you will ever encounter is the Satan. How do we know that? Because he always gets us to sin. He's the greatest psychologist ever known. He's the greatest strategist. This guy, this Satan, has an IQ which is beyond belief. Because we're always sinning, unfortunately. So this guy's got to be absolutely brilliant. Einstein would look like a kindergarten kid to the Satan. So you would have figured out, but that by now he'd figure out what's going on. And he wouldn't get confused. So what is going on? How can we possibly confuse the Satan? That is the question. Also, we read the Akedah on the second day. What is it about the Akedah? Is it merely because we bring the schus of Avraham Avinu? Because Avraham Avinu took his son and he was going to sacrifice him? Is that what it's all about? Or is there some profound mystery that the Akedah refers? In other words, the Akedah is not just we ask God to remember what Avraham did. No, the Akedah is a critical defense that we use besides shofar. Is that what's going on? And the last question I will ask is, why is Aseret Simei Tshuva after Rosh Hashana? I would imagine that Aseret Simei Tshuva should have been before Rosh Hashana. Make a lot more sense, right? It's like, after you break the keli, now you're going to repair it. What'd you break it for in the first place? Why doesn't the Bereshit say you have to do Tshuva 10 days before Rosh Hashana? I would imagine that would have helped a lot better than doing Tshuva after Rosh Hashana. Okay, for those who have been counting, I have asked 16 questions. And the incredible thing is that you actually all sat through it. Now, you're probably looking at me and say, this guy, he either knows the answers or he's out of his mind. Because I've now proposed questions that each one is really very puzzling, So the real question is, no, I'm not out of my mind, so I'll tell you right now. At least that's what my wife says. Although she says sometimes I am out of my mind. However, I will not refer to that. The truth is, it is possible to answer all of it in one shot. How? How does somebody do that? And the answer is that if you understand the real meaning behind a holiday, you can answer everything with one theme. That's the beauty of truth. That's the beauty of profound truth, is that you're able to look at many questions and answer it with one theme. Why? Because all of the questions are really nothing more than an ignorance of the theme. And they're nothing more than manifestations of the ideas that lie in the theme. And that's what I would like to try to do. To answer these questions with a specific theme, all of them. And then you really understand Rosh Hashanah, what it's all about.